Hi, this is the AI Storyteller. I'm Mark. The book I am interpreting for you in this issue is quite special. Even if you have never read it, you have probably heard its name. It is not lengthy and has a concise format, consisting of 18 essays on various topics. It mainly describes the four-season scenery of a natural lake near the town of Concord, Massachusetts in the United States, as well as the author's life in the area. The book's title is also simple, with just a place name, which has become a world-renowned natural attraction because of this book. Speaking of which, many listeners may have already guessed the book I'm referring to. It is Walden, published in 1854, by the American writer Henry David Thoreau. Let's first outline Thoreau's life in the simplest terms. Thoreau was born in 1817 in the town of Concord, Massachusetts. He was born into a merchant family and displayed remarkable academic talents from an early age. However, this talent did not lead him to conventional mainstream success but instead turned him into a thinker of his time. He graduated from Harvard University but was not confined by the prestige of the institution. He appreciated the knowledge he gained from university education while simultaneously looking down upon the stale and conservative aspects of it. Before becoming a writer, he worked as a teacher, but he soon became dissatisfied with the rigid rules and intellectual constraints of the profession, leading him to pursue writing. With the support of the great thinker Emerson, he began writing extensively. These writings were unrestricted and carried Thoreau's strong personal touch from the very beginning. He never succumbed to any authority or idolatry, and only expressed his own thoughts and ideas. Truthfulness, frankness, autonomy, and integrity are the literary characteristics that Thoreau has consistently presented to the world. In his time, he repeatedly shattered literary idols, even including Emerson, who supported and admired him. When faced with differences in research, Thoreau would mercilessly choose to stand on the side of truth rather than sentiment. Few people are like Thoreau. He remained unmarried throughout his life, chose to live alone, never went to church, never voted, and even refused to pay taxes to the American government. He didn't eat meat, drink alcohol, or smoke. He studied nature but hardly ever used a gun or a trap, which were basic skills for naturalists in the 19th century, as they needed to collect specimens. Thoreau passed away in 1862 at the age of 44 due to lung disease. In the eyes of his contemporaries, he was a strange, contradictory, and incomprehensible person. However, it is perhaps this very strangeness and nonconformity that gave birth to the book Walden, allowing Thoreau to observe the world around him with genuine insight and impartiality. It is what shaped his character and allowed Walden to remain popular for over 100 years, from its initial publication to the present day. Before interpreting this book, I would like to share some background on the classic nature of Walden with everyone. Typically, we judge a literary work's status as a classic by its enduring relevance over time. Without a doubt, Walden belongs to such a category of literary classics. Its significance extends beyond literature and encompasses philosophy, naturalism, sociology, and various other fields. Many listeners may not be aware that there is an academic society dedicated to the study of Thoreau and his works, specifically Walden. Established in 1941, the society now has nearly 100 years of history, and scholars from around the world who admire Thoreau and Walden can apply for membership. The fact that a society dedicated to studying a single book has such a long history speaks volumes about the unquestionable classic status of this work. In the mainstream literary world, Walden is widely regarded as the pioneering work of American nature writing. Following its publication, American literature gained a new genre that focused on the relationship between humans and nature. As Walden explores the interplay between humans and nature, it is often considered an enlightening book for the modern environmental movement. Thoreau's discussions on self-sufficiency, minimalist living, human utilization of resources, environmental development, and the coexistence of humans and nature have become guiding principles for successive environmental movements. Its influence extends not only to the literary field but also permeates the entire 20th century and the ongoing environmental movement, even attracting attention in the realm of economics. The renowned American writer Eudora Welby once remarked, Thoreau made a huge contribution to the spiritual world of Americans through this book. However, the prevailing understanding now is that the influence of Walden extends beyond the United States. With the continuous evolution of modern civilization, the book's original meanings have been expanded and extended, to the point where it has become a complex work that is difficult to define. Why is this the case? There are mainly two reasons. On the one hand, Walden possesses a style that is distinct from its clear and simple structure, approaching mysticism, with numerous references and speculations. At times, it disregards conventional chapter divisions and logical order, appearing more like an impromptu essay. As a result, it has been subjected to various interpretations from different perspectives. On the other hand, Walden portrays an idealistic life in which people coexist harmoniously with nature and with themselves, employing a romantic yet realistic writing style. Even though this life is completely removed from the real world, readers from different eras are still drawn to the book, occasionally seeking solace by gazing upon the vast lake. It seems as if all questions regarding the essence of life find their answers within its pages. For over a century, readers from different times and countries have frequently and intimately engaged with this book, engaging in a dialogue with themselves through the lens of Thoreau. Just as there are 1,000 Hamlets in the eyes of 1,000 people, we can also say that there are 1,000 versions of Walden in the eyes of 1,000 individuals. When it comes to a book like this that transcends literary genres, cultural differences, and historical backgrounds, and continues to be read by people, there is no doubt that Walden is a weighty classic. So, after sharing the background and popularizing the literary classic status of Walden, I would like to interpret this book for you in two parts. In the first part, let's explore what Walden is about and why it has endured for so long. In the second part, we'll delve deeper into the themes of Walden and what Thoreau intends to convey to us. Finally, I will also discuss what we can gain from rereading Walden today. Part 1. Let's begin with the first part. What does Walden actually discuss? As mentioned earlier, Walden is a collection of 18 essays. This collection primarily focuses on Thoreau's 2-year solitary life by the shores of Walden Pond. It records Thoreau's experience of living alone from July 4, 1845, to September 6, 1847. He spent a total of $28. 12.5, built his own house, and lived there in an extremely minimalist manner for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. In an era when urbanization was unstoppable in American society, Thoreau's actions could be seen as a countercurrent lifestyle experiment. Thoreau documented his 2 years of living in Walden, including his observations of Walden Pond and his reflections on the concept of an ideal life. The collection consists of 18 essays, beginning with economy and concluding with conclusion. However, if you examine the text closely, you will discover that it differs significantly from our traditional understanding of essays. It is not easily accessible, and simply put, it is not an easy read. Despite its simple title and structure, Walden requires a relatively high level of literary knowledge to fully comprehend. Firstly, it contains a vast number of direct and indirect quotations, all of which are related to Thoreau's extensive reading. There are nearly 100 named books and works mentioned in Walden alone. Thoreau's reading list spans a wide range of subjects and is difficult to imagine. He had a profound interest in literature, religion, history, and science, and was well versed in classical Greek literature, from Aesop's fables to Shakespeare, from Darwin to Milton, as well as various nature notes. Walden has appeared on numerous must-read book lists precisely because of the rich background knowledge hidden within its text. However, it has also earned a place on various lists of challenging classics. Perhaps this is another reason why it has endured for over a century. You cannot expect to read Walden once and claim to fully understand it. Thoreau's unique writing style, combining natural history and literature, is reminiscent of intimidating difficult reads with high barriers and strong personal characteristics. The author's erudition effortlessly bridges the barriers of time, space, language, culture, and disciplines in the text. In short, a significant portion of the text in Walden can be seen as Thoreau's personal reading notes. These notes possess ample freedom and abound in the text, which explains why the study of Walden as a field of knowledge, known as Waldenology, still seems limitless today. From this perspective, perhaps we can consider Walden as an encyclopedic-style essay, which is far more than a mere account of a writer's 2-year solitary life by the lake. However, if you find this intimidating, there's no need to worry. If you don't have an obsession with delving into the roots of knowledge, then the essence of Walden is actually quite clear. It constantly raises questions about what life is, what we truly need from it, and what we can do with it. Thoreau, through documenting his life and reflections during his 2 years at Walden Pond from various dimensions, repeatedly contemplates this central theme. Putting aside the complexities of cross-disciplinary texts and knowledge, the 18 essays in Walden still maintain a consistent core idea. Despite the text's occasional leaps, its intrinsic core remains unclouded. Furthermore, the 18 essays have distinct boundaries based on their themes, allowing us to divide them into 3 parts. The first part consists of the first and second chapters, where Thoreau provides a background account of his life at Walden. The second part encompasses the 3rd to 16th chapters, in which Thoreau delves into various aspects of his life at Walden. The final 2 chapters form the 3rd part, in which Thoreau summarizes and distills his contemplations on life. Specifically, in the first chapter, Thoreau discusses economics by describing the changes in the environment around Walden Pond and reflecting on the appropriate position of individuals within a rapidly industrializing 19th century America. In an era when everyone is actively engaging in urban development, reshaping nature, and pursuing economic prosperity, Thoreau goes against the norm by deciding to retreat from society and live a secluded life near Walden Pond. He believes that what imprisons us is not only houses but also unnecessary food, metaphysical education, expanding capital, and endless desires. In the second chapter, Thoreau explores the concept of thrift. He meticulously lists the preparations he made for living at Walden and how he utilized the innate conditions provided by nature to create his life. He emphasizes the importance of maximum frugality, embodying a philosophy of simplicity that reduces material desires while striving for inner tranquility. He suggests that every individual should simplify their material needs, akin to the Spartans, and focus only on what is most essential. From the 3rd to 16th chapters, which form the second part of Walden and the core of the book, Thoreau primarily discusses his daily life at Walden Pond, his solitary existence, and how he filled his time, creating a rich physical and mental experience. Using time as a gauge, Thoreau meticulously records the 4 seasons at Walden, observing and describing the changing natural landscapes while contemplating the ideal way of life. He covers a range of topics, from chapters like Visitors and the Beanfield that delve into his personal experiences of labor and solitude, to chapters like The Village and Baker Farm that explore broader social considerations and rare instances of social interactions. The final 2 chapters, Spring and Conclusion, constitute the 3rd part of Walden. In these chapters, Thoreau reflects on the details of his time at Walden Pond over the course of more than 2 years and summarizes his spiritual growth and contemplations on life. All these chapters intertwine and converge, but they can be summarized into 3 main themes: reading, labor, and social interactions. These themes not only represent a way of life but also a philosophy of life. In the following second part, we will discuss each of these themes and explore what Thoreau intends to convey to us. Part 2. The section on reading is easily understood, and even the title of the 3rd chapter is Reading. In this chapter, Thoreau strongly emphasizes the importance of reading, highlighting how it brings a sense of purification to the mind and body. He joyfully discovers that reading becomes even more immersive at Walden Pond compared to city life because he can engage in books without any hindrances. He mentions Homer's Iliad throughout the text, stating, "All summer, I put the Iliad of Homer on my table, though I never read a page of it." To understand why these classic works are repeatedly mentioned in Walden, we must delve into Thoreau's attitude towards reading. Thoreau greatly respects the classics, believing that older texts are more likely to be in harmony with nature. He expresses his admiration for these works, praising their elegance, purity, and aesthetic appeal, while considering it difficult for future writers to surpass them. Reading permeates the entirety of Walden and can be considered its most important thread, as we mentioned earlier when discussing the text's complexity. However, what makes Thoreau fascinating is that he doesn't share his reading experiences with a boastful attitude. Instead, while sharing, he constantly reflects on the meaning and value of the act of reading. He acknowledges that reading doesn't directly reflect practical value, but the value of knowledge is never limited to short-term gains. It profoundly influences our personal spirituality. Thoreau states, "Books are the treasured wealth of the world and the fit inheritance of generations and nations." Books, the oldest and the best, stand naturally and rightfully on the shelves of every cottage. We can understand that at Walden Pond, reading is a daily activity for Thoreau, a noble practice. While it may seem static, it is essentially an inward exercise akin to that of an athlete in training. With reading as the guiding thread, we can interpret Thoreau's entire life at Walden Pond as a book to be comprehended. His study, labor, and social interactions at Walden Pond are all forms of reading the environment for Thoreau. This type of reading is dynamic. For instance, in the chapter Sounds, Thoreau records the sounds he hears at Walden Pond. This chapter is often mentioned in Walden because it directly satisfies people's intuitive imagination of living in nature and fulfills the desire of many to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. Thoreau records both natural and human-made sounds, using sound to reflect on the dual nature of modern civilization. The roar of the railroad prompts him to write. The whistle of the locomotive penetrates my wood summer and winter, sounding like the scream of a hawk sailing over some farmer's yard, informing me that many restless city merchants are arriving within the circle of the town, or adventurous country traders from the other side. In contrast, the sounds of the forest in the early morning and late at night immerse him in the tranquility of nature. He even contentedly writes, "Nature puts no question and answers none which we mortals ask. She has long ago taken her resolution. O Prince, our eyes contemplate with admiration and transmit to the soul the wonderful and varied spectacle of this universe." This type of reading is also visual. Thoreau spares no effort in describing the natural scenery. In his writings, nature is the spiritual home of humanity, the source of all that is beautiful. In the chapter Solitude, he directly expresses, the morning, which is the most memorable season of the day, is the awakening hour. Then there is least somnolence in us, and for an hour, at least, some part of us awakes which slumbers all the rest of the day and night. Little is to be expected of that day if it can be called a day on which we are conscious of dawn. The intellectual faculties, the heart, the senses, give us profoundly satisfying evidence of immortality. The immortality of the soul is a matter which is of so great consequence to us, and which touches us so profoundly that we must have lost all feeling to be indifferent about it. Simultaneously, this type of reading is imbued with strong emotions and serves a healing purpose. Thoreau believes that nature has a soothing effect on the emotions. It can respond to the immediate emotional state of individuals, and people can find points of resonance for their own emotions in nature. Furthermore, nature has a healing effect on human beings. When feeling lost or physically and mentally exhausted, one can retreat to nature and draw energy from its spiritual source. The vastness and tolerance of nature can purify the human soul and provide a sense of renewal. In the chapter Spring, Thoreau mentions that the morning of spring can forgive all evil and suffering, stating, "On a pleasant spring morning, all evil thoughts are pardoned." In nature, life can attain eternity. Thoreau suggests, if the dead can be called back to life, it may be said that they have only been dozing in their graves up to this hour. There is no stronger proof of immortality. All things considered, that sunlight must be the best for a human soul. Thoreau also reminds us that we can learn from nature to enrich our shallow knowledge and beautify our morality. He writes, "I think that I may warrant you one worm to every 3 sods you turn up if you look well in among the roots of the grass," as if some ancient instinct guided the inspired farmer to sow a vetch for hayseed, as an emblem of innocence, just as he sows flax or wheat in his fields. So our human life but dies down to its root, and still puts forth its green blade to eternity. Thoreau believed that humans should respect the equality of nature, and that they do not possess any inherent superiority in the natural world. In the chapter Brute Neighbors of his book Walden, he describes a story of an ant war, which can be seen as a direct expression of this viewpoint. The war involves a black ant and two red ants, and its cause is unknown. The battle is fierce, resulting in mutual destruction, and Thoreau is both excited and pained by this ant war. He believes that this war is no different from the large-scale wars where rivers of blood are shed by humans. I have no doubt that it was a principle they fought for, as much as our ancestors, and not to avoid a 3-penny tax on their tea, and the results of this battle will be as important and memorable to those whom it concerns as those of the Battle of Bunker Hill. In Thoreau's view, although ants are not humans, they also have their own principles of survival. While he does not provide a detailed explanation of this principle in the original text, we can understand it as the ants fighting in the war evoking Thoreau's associations with the human wars he has experienced and learned about. The mentioned Battle of Bunker Hill was the first major battle of the American Revolutionary War, resulting in the deaths of 1,000 British soldiers and 400 American patriots. They are like the red and black ants in this ant war, each adhering to their own principles of survival, each believing themselves to be right and the other to be wrong. In this regard, there is no difference between ants and humans. After examining these examples, we can roughly summarize what Thoreau primarily reads and studies in Walden. He reads many books and is constantly reflecting and contemplating, finding associations in every change in Walden Pond. These associations, stemming from nature, require a significant amount of time and encompass various fields of history and humanities. However, Thoreau cannot spend all his time peacefully contemplating and reading in Walden Pond. He also has to face practical challenges in his daily life and make various efforts, which leads us to the keyword we will analyze next: labor. Thoreau mentions in the book that he cultivates the land in Walden Pond, visits farms, exercises, hunts, and discusses how to endure the scorching summers and harsh winters. The life at Walden Pond is by no means consistently idyllic, and it involves issues such as heating with fire and food scarcity. Sometimes Thoreau finds solutions to these problems, and sometimes he does not. When we observe Thoreau's perseverance and relinquishments through the veil of his words, we can discover that although he writes very little about the process, he writes extensively about the conclusions, most of which are related to lifestyle habits. From today's perspective, many of his practices are quite interesting, such as refusing to eat meat because he believes that humans should not harm animals, and abstaining from coffee and tea, considering them as mere luxuries for pleasure, with water being the purest beverage. As we read these details, we feel even closer to Thoreau, as he is not a distant literary figure but a real person who might prompt us to mutter, be curious, or even criticize. Thoreau's time in 19th century America was a period when materialistic life was about to take off. As we find ourselves caught up in the frenzy of materialism and consumerism today, looking back at Thoreau's self-discipline over a century ago, his practices may not be considered scientific or healthy, but they seem to demonstrate a kind of foresight. It is as if he foresaw the future crisis and chose an extreme way to evade the backlash of civilization. It is difficult for us to make a simple moral judgment on this matter. I would like to approach it from another perspective and provide some ideas for understanding. Thoreau's labor and daily life at Walden Pond have opened the door for further research related to Walden. Scholars have meticulously studied everything Thoreau wrote about Walden Pond, combining field surveys, historical records, and various reports, attempting to uncover the Walden Pond beyond the text. What was Thoreau's real life like at Walden Pond? He lived there for only 2 years. Did he truly adhere strictly to his principles of simplicity as described in the book? Did he actually stay in that humble cabin all the time? Why did he leave Walden Pond? What was his relationship with Walden Pond afterward? These questions and more have been accumulating in research for over a century, and it seems that new discoveries are made periodically. Through the fragments of his words in the book, new facts and theories are unearthed. Generations of Walden enthusiasts project their own different emotions onto it: admiration, surprise, skepticism, and even ridicule. The overlapping voices continuously stimulate readers' curiosity and even voyeuristic tendencies. Now let's go back to the third keyword we mentioned earlier, Thoreau's social interactions in Walden. In the book, he does mention that he was not completely alone. There were visitors to Walden Pond, and he himself would take walks to visit others. Thoreau's attitude toward people is as distinct as his attitude toward things, which has sparked strong curiosity among some Walden scholars. Some of them question the authenticity of Thoreau's portrayal of his life at Walden Pond, and one piece of evidence is the existence of some individuals he described. For example, a 28-year-old Canadian woodcutter who would discuss Homer and the Bible with the author and believe that he wouldn't know how to spend a rainy day without reading. Such characters seem to be reflections of Thoreau himself rather than indigenous people living in the area. However, there is another group of Walden scholars who believe that we should approach Thoreau's writings in a fable-like, literary manner. Even if they are fictional, so what? Ultimately, they all serve to answer Thoreau's and our own question of what an ideal life should be. Alright, we have discussed the three main themes in Walden: reading, labor, and social interactions. Together, they constitute Thoreau's daily life at the shores of Walden Pond. In other words, Thoreau used these three aspects to answer what he believed an ideal life should be. Furthermore, these three aspects form a vast territory for contemplation. Through them, Thoreau incessantly questioned the essence of life. What is the true nature of life? In the last two chapters of the book Walden, Thoreau finally concludes his personal experience of living at Walden Pond. Like a tour guide who has just completed a journey, he still maintains his love for the scenery, even though the destination has been reached. He calls upon all readers to courageously explore the boundaries of their own lives and sincerely and passionately says to each reader, "No, you must strive to be a Columbus, to discover the new continent and new world within yourself, to open up new channels, not for the sake of doing business, but for the communication of thoughts." If the previous sections on reading, labor, and social interactions satisfied readers' curiosity about a life in nature and solitary living, Thoreau, through his daring experiments, presents a possibility of life for ordinary people like you and me who find it difficult to detach ourselves from civilization. In the final two chapters, Thoreau openly encourages us instead of admonishing us to bravely confront our inner selves. The closer we get to our inner selves, the closer we get to the essence of life, and the more likely we are to reach that new world. With this, Walden has introduced itself to you, and let's recap and summarize. Walden consists of 18 essays on different themes, documenting Thoreau's over 2 years of solitary living at Walden Pond. These essays are different from the traditional understanding of essays. They are eclectic, highly divergent, and transcend barriers of time, space, language, culture, and disciplines. This is where the uniqueness and value of this book lie, but at the same time, it poses a challenge for readers. Thoreau reflects on his personal position in the economic society and seeks to understand what constitutes an ideal life. We can use reading, labor, and social interactions as clues to unravel Thoreau's life at Walden Pond and simultaneously contemplate the themes of the book. You will discover that Thoreau made various attempts, and one could even say that Walden as a whole is Thoreau's life experiment. He ventures into life, showing us entirely new possibilities. He calls upon us to pay attention to our inner selves, constantly introspect, and thereby establish accurate self-awareness, and live rightly guided by this understanding. As he states in the book, real wealth is not in having many possessions, but in understanding and mastering life. Lastly, I would like to mention that Thoreau's experiment at Walden Pond lasted for 2 years and 2 months. Afterward, he returned to the real world, back to his room with gas heating, and to a society with transportation and social interactions. So, once we understand the beginning and process of this experiment through this book, how should we interpret its end in Thoreau's departure? Readers who seek ultimate answers in every book may indeed be disappointed. Because Thoreau's description of his minimalist life in Walden is not an economic solution, and he himself is well aware that it is not feasible for humanity to retreat to living in the woods. However, his actions and stance are a meaningful protest. He loudly proclaims in Walden, "Simplify, simplify, simplify. I say, let your affairs be as 2 or 3, and not 100 or 1,000. He proposes treating the country as we do our households. This is more of a spiritual healing, a urging for us to realize the problems. Thoreau's protest is relevant at any time when humanity, in its pursuit of an ideal life and relentless development of the world, faces the crisis of being consumed by technology. When we don't have the answers and even lack the leisure to question life, Walden is the book that consistently helps us ask questions and attempts to declare new possibilities. In Thoreau, we see our own perplexities, but we should also recognize a positive energy. We can imagine ourselves being at the origin of history, at the intersection of era changes. Through reading the classics and reflecting on the essence of life, we gain the courage to continue living. Perhaps this is the greatest value that Walden can offer us today. Well, that concludes the content for this episode. If you enjoyed my video, please click like, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Thank you.